This is the 11:40 hours GMT edition of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo editions. Baby Angel Geronimo is the world's bestest Baby Angel Geronimo, the bestest witness, witnessing the depravity, corruption, criminality, greed, and lack of competence, lack of relevance, personified by the evilness called Boris Johnson. And personified in other similar criminals and evilnesses. Today's updates, of course, include update on Johnson's being in the news as featured on the front page of the Observer, which is the Guardian Observer, about a new kind of item that has not been noticed in the news, at least not by us. Item about breaking the law, holding what is being described as the ABBA party or an ABBA party on top of the particular flat in Downing Street. In breach of the law, in breach of the rules, in breach of the COVID restrictions that ordinary people are being compelled to oblige. And this is called the Partygate, party that is being described as the ABBA party, which is being described as or explained as a reference to the very loud noise that this party was generating, to the extent that the so-called press room on the ground floor or below the actual floor where this ABBA party was taking place, people in the press room could hear the loud noise. That is why it is being branded or has been branded as the ABBA party. And the other item, of course, featuring Johnson, relates to Brexit. And the Brexit reference is to do with the latest attempts by Rishi Sunak to sort out the aspect of the Brexit that affects the UK's Northern Ireland part. Northern Ireland refers to the main island of Ireland, where the main part of the island of Ireland is a member of the European Union. So transport and connections between the Northern Ireland part of the island and the Ireland, EU member island of Ireland, is the subject of the detailed kind of controversy and arguments and so-called negotiations that have been featuring for years since the so-called Brexit was going to be done. So it seems that there is a consensus among the majority of the conservative politicos who are supportive of Rishi Sunak are of the view that Sunak is on the right track. And the piece in the Sunday Times by Dominic Lai's son, the son of Nigel Lai's son, gives a kind of conditional approval, thumbs up to the Rishi Sunak moves concerning the EU and the Northern Ireland. And there is a piece on page 16 of the Sun on Sunday which says Nicola Sturgeon's exit could give Keir Starmer 25 seats and keys to number 10. That's a piece by John Curtis. John Curtis is described as senior research fellow at Con Social Research and UK in a changing Europe. Curtis is effectively now the main kind of commentator on electoral kind of tendencies and propensities, and so therefore his views are likely to be considered as significant. And it says that the last paragraph by John Curtis reads, these coming weeks will have profound implications, not just for the SNP, but for Labour, the Tories, and the fate of the independence movement and union for many years to come. That is a comment on the exit of Nicola Sturgeon from the post of office of the Prime First Minister in Scotland. Now, I haven't noticed yet, but I would say that Nicola Sturgeon, who is not to be compared with Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand on many issues, especially including issues of race, racism, and the antagonism and hatred against Muslims. But Sturgeon has staged this particular way of staging the resignation almost by following the manner and the style shown by Jacinda Ardern. We shall be talking more about the racist legacy of Nicola Sturgeon, the racist composition of her kind of cabinet and government, and the racist behavior of the SNP members of the Scottish Parliament, as well as the condoning of racism at Westminster by the SNP MPs that have been members of Parliament in the last two elections. Sturgeon is a racist, and Sturgeon is a shameless racist who has refused to deny the racist culture that she has cultivated, and Sturgeon has not made anything like the waves in Scotland. From Scotland, that she has been associated with making about the so called independence. And I read many of the comments in Fleet Street as being of the view that Sturgeon has been forced to resign because of the very serious problems she caused herself by overdoing the gender reassignment. And I think that in time, this will be seen as the main reason why she was forced to resign, not the reported waning in support for the independence of Scotland from England. We shall move on to the political murderer of the Labour Party, the criminal liar, Keir Starmer. And immediately after Sturgeon's resignation, almost all the Tory supporting commentators in Fleet Street began to endorse the idea that Starmer was going to be the main beneficiary of Sturgeon's exit. Now, if that is the case, and the Sun on Sunday is saying the same thing, if that is the case and Sturgeon's exit contributes to the political murderer, Keir Starmer, getting nearer to number 10 Downing Street, then the question is, whose agenda will this criminal be implementing? And we shall be examining Starmer in greater detail another time. Now, the heading to Karen Brady's piece in the Sun on Sunday reads typically middle of the road enough. Coronation, that is Brian's coronation as king, she says, should be a chance to truly unite our kingdom. What is she meaning by unite our kingdom? She says, King Charles and Camilla, there is a lot resting on that little trip to Westminster Abbey on 6th of May. You must need, sorry, I read that again. You just need to get your whole family pulling together for one day. or at least looking like it is, and avoid offending the Commonwealth. Now, what does she mean by Commonwealth? Is she talking about racism? We haven't read the whole thing yet, but we shall check that before we move on to other aspects. Let's check what Karen Brady's piece does actually contain. So this was posted online on the Sun on Sundays website 15 hours ago, which says 21 hours GMT on 18th of February. And it was updated published at 21 hours and updated at 1835. Now that is quite a contradiction. It kind of goes backwards. Updated cannot be timed backwards. Anyway, we'll ignore that. Just so let's check if Karen Brady in that piece what actually mentions the word racism as opposed to Commonwealth, which use has brought me to check whether she has used the word racism. Okay, so let's see if she is using the I don't think that Karen Brady would be using the word or the concept of race or racism. Why? Because anyone who uses Commonwealth is, of course, doing that as an intentional alternative to having to use race and racism. When there was this so called Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit in London in probably July or August 1977, I attended this as what is called the accredited journalist. To get hold of the accreditation, I had to spend the previous 2 months in various communications with the UK's then Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And the person that was in charge of the contracts that I had or had to make was a Snow. Is related either the older brother or elder brother of Peter Snow or one of the Snows. He looked a Snow and he behaved like a Snow. and I represented the Northeast Polytechnic Activists Monitor. It is also known as NEPAM, NEPAM, which had been founded in the 1970s, a leading part being played by, I think, an Australian called Greer, John Greer, who was the holder of the post of editor before me. Not immediately before me, but he was one of the ones before me. The immediate one that was before me, whom I had to actually defeat at the election in 1976, was Jerry Udall. I should talk about Jerry Udall and his attitude towards me because I defeated him and so on. 76. So the Northeast Polytechnic Activist Monitor was an ambitious name. And when I took over in 76, I found that the contents of the NEPAM under the editorship of Jerry Udall were not only not anything to do with activists monitor, but those contents were the contents of a rag that represented a collection of drunkards and completely apolitical morons. So the NEPAM that I created actually was the first one that had the contents representing and reflecting activism and audit. That published, I would say, about altogether, I would say, I published about 100,000 words in 1 year. And the battles that I had to fight, despite the fact that I was the elected editor, elected as publications editor of the Northeast London Polytechnic, which is now the University of East London. The fact that I was elected was taken by me as ethically, morally consistent with my purpose and the manifesto. But this was not the case with the other components of the student political body, which was, in terms of numbers, dominated by the SWP wonkers, socialist wonkers. The socialist wonkers were known as the International Socialists in 1976, I think. And one of the things that I noticed was that the socialist wonkers were as corrupt, as opportunistic, as nepotistic as the so-called capitalist versions would have been and were. One of the contributors to the napalm that I edited was someone called Gary Bushell. Gary Bushell was a student at the Northeast London Polytechnic. Not only that, he was a member of the Socialist Workers. Of course, he was elected to succeed me. Not only that, Gary Bushell, degenerated into the Gary Bushell that everyone knows as the contributor to a lot of racist kind of pop articles, including he's currently a columnist on the Daily Star on Sunday. More about Gary Bushell. Now, one of the pieces that Gary Bushell had written by hand in 76 was about the racists in the Northeast London Polytechnic. I don't think he would ever write that again because it was quite genuinely dedicated to a rejection of racism. How that same Gary Bushell became the Gary Bushell of the racists, I will examine. And I'll examine by evidence, not because I don't agree with that role that he adopted. It would be towards understanding why somebody like Gary Bushell, who wrote such a open anti-racist piece against the racists by hand and gave it to me during a meeting at the Walthamstow site. How did he become a kind of cheerer for racists in Fleet Street and elsewhere? I shall examine why Gary Bushell became the Gary Bushell that he did become. I think one of the things that has happened in the last, 2 calendar years, because I had to go to hospital where I stayed for 3 calendar months. One of the world exclusive intellectual properties that I had in my flat was a complete collection of the whole year's print editions of the napalm that I had created. So this is one of the things that is the subject of a very big legal claim, because a criminal has stolen my contents from my flat while I was in hospital, or while I was away from the flat, because after being discharged from hospital, I was then accommodated at a interim place somewhere in Essex. And the details of how this happened has been made known to Ruxana Fiaz, because the flat is in Newham, and the various roles played by the Newham Council Social Services contributed to the theft, and also the National Health Service, which had the condition that people who are inpatients were not allowed to go and visit their homes, even though it would have been for 2 or 3 hours. So that is also part of the claim. And the claim, in context, this context, the claim is part of the claim affecting all the intellectual properties. And it's a huge claim because the losses affect and have affected world exclusive intellectual properties and creations. So this has been 30 minutes, 45 seconds of this edition. I shall now move on to Karen Brady. And Karen Brady has not used the word racism about Brian. She said Brian should not offend the Commonwealth. Now, Karen Brady has been given one of the most prominent platforms by racists in this country. Karen Brady was mysteriously given a very prominent series of jobs by the well known, notorious pornographer David Sullivan. And the column that appears in Karen Brady's name, I don't believe for a moment, is written entirely by Karen Brady. But the fact that she is connected with Alan Sugar and the Conservatives, etc., is by Murdoch's Scum on Sunday to give her that platform, which is this column that appears on Sundays. It is the piece that she says on the kind of heading, coronation should be a chance to truly unite our kingdom. That is as shallow as is Brian's visit to the Altavali Park, to Brick Lane, etc. Because Brian first arrived in the commercial road area in the 1980s. And Brian was then Prince of Wales, and he was feted by the then kind of incumbents as kind of local councillors approved by the state. Again, part of my portfolio pictures of Brian in the commercial road area in a street called Sly Street are among the items that were among the intellectual properties that form the subject of the claim. And the defendants include the London Borough of Newham, the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, and the other involved wrongdoers, as well as individuals. Now, when I say world exclusive intellectual properties, I literally mean that, because there are three aspects to every assertion of world exclusive intellectual properties. First of all, that I created the art, the intellectual property. And secondly, nobody else has either created anything like that or could create anything like that. And the third thing is that even I couldn't produce the same thing, because by definition, each of the creations has been factual, contemporaneous, and original. So the value and the demand for compensation is accordingly that high because of the extremely, extremely, undeniably unreplaceable fact of each of the items. Now, when I say Lutfur Rahman is a liar, I say that based on the evidence of his behavior. Secondly, when I say that Lutfur Rahman is intellectually challenged, I say that on the evidence. And when I say that Lutfur Rahman is a crook, I say that on the evidence. Say, for example, sometime between 1330 hours and let's say 1500 hours, let's say generously that time. On Friday, the 29th of October 2010, I filmed Lutfur Rahman in the Wentworth Street. The Wentworth Street is a continuation of the street that leaves the Valence Road in the east and heads west, and it becomes Wentworth Street after it passes Greatorex Street. So Wentworth Street continues up to the commercial street. It goes beyond Brick Lane, the junction of Brick Lane and Osborne Street, and it heads for the west up to Commercial Street. So I stood at the corner of Osborne Street and I looked 45 degrees to the right and I focused the camera on the group of five, I think maximum five individuals, including Lutfur Rahman. Now, the reason why I stood there and the reason I focused the camera on the group of people in that particular spot, on that spot, was solely to do with the fact that the Boishaki Mela, which I shall discuss in detail later, the Boishaki Mela had been one of the most powerful stimuluses or stimuli behind the decision by Shiraj, the business person called Shiraj. He is not known as Mr. Haque. He is known as Shiraj. And his name Haque, he imitated the spelling of my name and changed his original spelling, which is another topic. Now, Shiraj had the headquarters in the Wentworth Street of his Clifton operations, from where Shiraj had issued various endorsements and supports and so on for the bid to impose the elected mayor post on the people of Tower Hamlets. And the main purpose why Shiraj had done that was overwhelming majority of the opinion prevailing in the community in Tower Hamlets, so that he, Shiraj, could get hold of the Boishaki Mela, which was producing significant amounts of money for him. So when Lutfur Rahman and let's say his crew left the Brick Lane Mosque after the Juma prayers on the Friday, the 29th of October 2010, one of the first things that they wanted to celebrate was to have a excited rendezvous with Shiraz and mark their victory. The only problem was that in their plan included, they had not included at all the possibility that I would be there to witness Lutfur Rahman going into Shiraz's business door through the door or doors, followed by his crew. Now, it lasted a few seconds, maybe, or maybe 1 minute at most, but it felt like 14 years or something. Because as they were heading into the Wentworth Street from Brick Lane, Lutfur Rahman and his crew determinedly were heading to go into the office HQ of Shiraz's Clifton. But as they did that, they were caught, mesmerized, and stunned by the fact that I was standing not that far with the camera rolling. Now, the camera rolling and the camera being held by me was the very last thing they wanted to see. And even worse, they didn't want that to happen while they were going into Shiraz's business HQ in the Wentworth Street. That man, that Lutfur Rahman had to decide very quickly to go straight past Shiraz's doors, Clifton doors, as if he didn't even know that there was a factor like Shiraz's doors or anything. He was only going straight towards the old Montague Street, as I say, which is the other end of the Wentworth Street. And it is in the old Montague Street that Lutfur Rahman had his home. So when they came to the door or doors, in the colloquial Siloti, it would be a door, not a plural as in English, doors. তারা যখন দুয়ারর খান্দাত আইছে, সিরাজর দুয়ারর খান্দাত, আখতা তারার মনে হয় আইছে, মাই গড কিতাও ইয়া জারিনো, আমরা ইনো হামাইলে সর্বনাশ. And they would have been absolutely correct. Whatever words they used or would have used, they would have been absolutely correct to say that the very last thing they wanted to be part of was to be filmed by me as they went into Shiraz's business HQ. But that prompted the crew to do a number of maneuvers physically do a few loops and spins as they hastily conferred as to what to do. There was unexpected realization on the part of Lutfur Rahman that he was being witnessed and was being recorded. And then it was followed by a swift transformation of his face into one of gloom and disappointment. But according to the law and according to common practice, I was perfectly doing the most natural, logical things. I was filming in the street, and the street did not belong to either Lutfur Rahman or his crew or to Siraj. It is a public highway. But the fact that I was there and they were there meant that there had to be only one side that would prevail. And the witness was the Sony camcorder bought earlier that year with a card used by K. Jordan. That Sony camcorder became the prevailing instrument for recording the event, which was that Lutfur Rahman was forced to beat a retreat, literally, for a few seconds, running away from the area very near to Shiraj's doors towards the old Montague Street. So that is the power of the evidence. That evidence is not negotiable. Nobody can interpret the objective truth of what happened there as being anything other than what it was. It was the one single incident that established the connection between Lutfur Rahman and Shiraj in the bid for the capturing of the post of mayor at the expense of Tower Hamlets. That was the moment. Any number of communications by telephone, by email, whatever. There exists no similar item of evidence connecting Lutfur Rahman with Shiraj and the Boishaki Mela. So this is something that is not there in Karan Brady's piece in the Sun on Sunday. She talks about the Commonwealth. Karan Brady has no idea about the Commonwealth. There is no such thing as Commonwealth. What there is underneath that word Commonwealth is the British Empire. And the work that I did in the role that I was elected to in 1976 in creating an atmosphere of union the East London University of East London population towards accountability by the regime, towards ending the racist discrimination against what we then called the overseas students. That has not been repeated by any publisher, any student publication at all, either in the Northeast London Polytechnic or any of the universities. During my time, I also traveled across England, especially to cover the campaigning trips that Philip A.G. was making to various campuses in England. And it was I, with the help of Denise Bailey, that produced the unique transcripts of all these speeches that I had recorded in Philip A.G.'s speeches. And what I did was to distribute free of charge in 1976 all these transcripts that I had made with the to all the campuses across England. That was world exclusive intellectual property created by me and distributed by me, and the value of the intellectual property that I thus created and distributed for the posterity and for the students' active awareness of what was going on was unique, remains unique. Was Ruxana Fiaz even alive at that time in 1976? Has to be checked. When was she born? Let's see if there is an accurate entry to Ruxana Fiaz on the wiki. Okay, she was alive. She was. So 76, she would have been 5 years old. She was born in December 1971. We shall be checking on Roxana Fayaz's progress. Now, one of the things that I did as editor, publications editor, was to continue what I was doing before I got elected, because I had also created a weekly publication from Plasto called Feedback. So, Feedback was unique, an absolutely world exclusive, unique publication that I created in 1975. And it was significantly based on the work that I did with Feedback that my candidature for election to the post of publications editor was significantly supported. And one of the people that supported me in the campaign for election to the post of publications editor was a man called Fred Short. Now, Fred Short was a former trade unionist who had joined the program called diploma in higher education. Now, what is his name? That is where the complete liar, Tony Travers, was also based as a student. Now, if you look at Tony Travers' entry, Tony Travers is now a professor at the LSE. He's a complete and absolute fucking liar. Now, Tony Travers was a liar, and I have said that to the BBC, and I'm saying it now as well. He was lying there. The Wikipedia entry this liar, we had a lot of confrontations with the liar over his lies. There is no date of birth, and there is nothing about his family, personal, whatever. And and the reason is that Travers was cited at the Northeast London Polytechnic by a racist criminal called Anthony Burgess. And I had a lot of arguments with Burgess, the liar. And the reason is because of the lies that they were perpetrating there. And Travers was slotted in the program that Burgess was allowed to kind of foist as a pseudo academic kind of program. And there is no record of Travers going to whatever school he must have gone. And there is no record of anything prior to his surfacing as an academic at the LSE. Can you imagine? I'm talking about the 1970s, when the criminal crook Burgess was sponsored to create this diploma in higher education or whatever. And it said that it didn't need any prior formal education. Now, despite the fact that Travers was called a student, he acted actually as the de facto operative running the Burgess program. Now, here in the wiki entry, there is no sign of any of that. There is no life before the LSE. And it says he's written for the Evening Standard, the Guardian, the Independent, Financial Times, the Times, and all the other things. Anyway, so this criminal epitomized the crimes that were committed under the covers of academia. So, as an activist monitor, publications editor, I became naturally interested in the sourcing, the origins of the likes of Tony Travers. So, in our period, that is me and the colleagues like Fred Short And there was a trade unionist called Bob Harper. But Bob Harper completely misunderstood me. Although he was my comrade, etc., etc., he described me as a very sophisticated professional involved in whatever I was involved in as part of my career. Bob Harper obviously didn't know me because it is against this career that I have been active all my time. Here for 50 plus years, and before I entered the United Kingdom at the beginning of the 1970s. So when Karen Brady was slaughtered by the pornographer David Sullivan, who has taken over the West Ham football club, etc., etc. Neither Brady nor the pornographer Sullivan has shown any recognition to the people of Newham, Waltham Forest, or whatever. And so, therefore, when she says that she is advising Brian not to offend the Commonwealth, she is being as corrupt, as racist, as artificial as she always has been. She'll be talking about today's Sun on Sunday front page, which is running a heading, different heading to the piece that the Mail on Sunday is running about King Brian evicting the rapist and sex trafficker Andrew. Now, there is a piece in the Sunday Times magazine, the cover, featuring Angela Rayner, who is quoted as saying, I overshare, care undershares. And their question is Angela Rayner, Labour's straight talker, ready for government? And obviously, the implication of this Sunday Times piece on the question about Angela Rayner suggests that Fleet Street is quite ready for Angela Rayner because there was a very kind of deferential interview with Angela Rayner that Beth Rigby on Sky News did. And the way that Beth Rigby spoke to Angela Rayner gave away a lot of kind of body language, if you like, confirmation that they were ready for Angela Rayner. And I think that the fact that they are preparing for Angela Rayner to be in government and the quote Angela Rayner is saying about Keir Starmer, nothing about him gets on my nerves. Now that's a very crafty kind of quote. So the piece has got significant part of it about the row about transgender. So the thing about the piece magazine Now, this is an interview by this woman called Decca Aitkenhead, and I shall be discussing this in a later edition because the contents of the piece and the context demand a longer time than is available in this particular edition. Thrown out of home as a teenage mum, Angela Rayner grafted her way to the top of the Labour Party. Is she ready to be Britain's Deputy Prime Minister? Now, clearly, Angela Rayner has been getting increasingly better coverage from Fleet Street and the media than had been the case when she started. And I think that that is significant. Now, what she does with that is a question that will be part of my investigation into her. And my investigation into Angela Rayner, of course, starts from Tower Hamlets. Because when she became appointed shadow education secretary during Jeremy Corbyn's time as the leader of the Labour Party, I was involved in the campaign to get rid of the racist head teacher at the Ian McArdle School. So we shall be revisiting the Ian McArdle School and the fact that I wrote and sent communications to Angela Rayner publicly, that is true, including her in tweets that mentioned the Ian McArdle School. And to this day, Angela Rayner has not acknowledged or responded or replied to any of those. That shows that despite the fact that she is getting promoted, that is, promotions, by the otherwise anti-Labour Party, Fleet Street, Angela Rayner is not going to turn out to be accountable, democratic, most certainly not an anti-racist. So we shall be cutting her down to the facts, the evidence of her behavior in due course. Now, in the piece, on page, there is this headed TV station shut as Iran's target UK staff. And it says dissident channel relocates after Metropolitan Police advice. Now, let me say this dissident television station had nothing to do with Iranians setting it up. It's a station that would not have existed in the United Kingdom without the active role played by the UK state. I don't have to explain this, but I do say this in context that I am opposed to the fascistic policies of the Iranian regime, have always been. But I also recognize their international rights to campaign in their own way against anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic policies of the West, Western media, Western governments, etc., etc. I support Nazanin Ghaffari, Ratcliffe, and other protesters in Iran. But I also condemn the role played by the depraved liar Boris Johnson, who contributed to Nazanin's detention by Iran by series of lies and lying and the refusal by the UK state to pay the money that they owed the Iranian government, etc., etc. So the first point is that the TV station is not the TV station the Sunday Times is claiming it is. It's a British state operation, and we shall talk more about it in due course, not in this edition, as I said, because of the limitation of time. This particular one, the second prominent one, byline by 3 to 3-1, three reporters, Sean Griffiths, Glenn Keogh, and Ben Spencer. This is headed by these 6 words. Tavistock children still referred for blockers. What this is, the children are still being referred for puberty blockers at a gender clinic ordered to close by the NHS, and plans for a replacement service have stalled. About 8,000 young people remain on the waiting list for the Gender Identity Development Service, and 1,000 children are receiving treatment, including prescriptions for puberty blockers to halt development in under 16s who are transgender. The clinic, part of the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, was told to close in July last year after an independent review by Dr. Hilary Cass concluded that young people were left at considerable risk of poor mental health and distress. NHS England aimed to establish new regional hubs in London and Manchester by spring 2023, after the Cass review recommended that one clinic having complete oversight was not a safe and viable long term option. It was anticipated the Tavistock Clinic would close at around this time. However, it has emerged that the spring deadline will be missed, and no time frame is in place for the new hubs to open. The domestic service must be given 6 months' notice to close by NHS England and is yet to be told of the next steps, meaning it will remain open until at least August. Now, this is part of the British, let's say in the context of Britain, let's say, British state and its ancillary agencies messing up natural biology. And again, as we said about the so called shock resignation by Nicola Sturgeon as Scotland's first minister, it's connected with the insane, insane option by Nicola Sturgeon to be trendy with the gender reassignment, etc. I think they're going too far. Not because I don't agree with the imperialists and whatever. I think they are interfering with biology, natural biology. And that shows, and let's the role of DEFRA, the Department for the Environment and Rural whatever, made create a record based with no facts. The record claiming that he was infected, that he was a danger to other animals. All of those were lies and remain lies. This as we said, he is the barometer. Baby Angel Geronimo is the barometer of what is going wrong with various aspects and parts and segments of the UK state. So when you say Baby Angel Geronimo editions of the Khoodeelaar television channel, we mean the Baby Angel Geronimo editions cover every facet, every known physical, material aspect of the behavior of the UK state. So what they did wrong, the criminals at DEFRA, criminal misled by the evilness called the so-called Chief Vedh, Christian evilness, Middle Miss, aided and abetted by the depraved liar Boris Johnson, aided and abetted by the criminal George Injustice Eustace. These criminals were doing this lying, open, brazen conspiracy to blame a perfectly innocent baby angel Geronimo as being infected when he wasn't, as being unwell when he wasn't, and he couldn't be. And this was being done in the open, with the knowledge of the entirety of the so called mainstream British press and media. And despite the fact that the media were sent extensive first-hand evidence by Helen MacDonald, baby angel Geronimo's human mum in South Gloucestershire, the media failed to rigorously investigate the evidence and to rigorously investigate the claims against baby angel Geronimo that the DEFRA liars were repeatedly being allowed by the courts to make without any evidence whatsoever. So baby angel Geronimo arrived in the UK from New Zealand in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 7 calendar years ago. And the liars at the UK DEFRA for 7 years have lied, and they have not produced a single shred of evidence to justify any of the dozens of lies they have confected and invented against baby angel Geronimo. So you extrapolate that kind of behavior to cover the behavior of the various people involved in the puberty blocking medication and programs aimed at transgender youngsters. And you look at the behavior of Nicola Sturgeon, who went out of her way to come across as being trendier than the most trendy of the sex transfer, gender transfer groupies. And that has been her undoing. And this actually extends to the harassment of J.K. Rowling, the writer, the other side of the brigade. And what is happening is there something similar to some things that happened thousands of years ago when civilization, so-called, completely collapsed, because those who claim to be the guardians of those civilizations began to experiment with nature, try to interfere with nature, and they completely collapsed. We shall be talking about all of those, and of course we shall be updating on Shamima Begum and Hrs Council, on Neom Council and others in due course. This is now ending at 1 hour 23 minutes. Well, 1 hour 24 minutes at 13:05 GMT on Sunday, the 19th of February, 2023. And there are, in the video of the broadcast, there are few interruptions, few parts of the video, which is the same video, but parts of the video they appear to be not containing any of the data of the actual broadcast.